In this world, the sky cracked open before the city ever learned to fear masks. That is the first thing to understand, because everything else grows out of it. The great convergence of the spirits came early here, years ahead of the calendar anyone had written for it, and when the light of two opposing powers flooded across the earth, it left gifts scattered in its wake like shells after a tide. Ordinary people woke up with the wind answering to their breath. A farmer's daughter stepped off the ground without meaning to. In the metal clan of the Earth Kingdom, in the cramped apartments of Republic City, in villages that had never produced a bender in living memory, the impossible became a household fact. The world did not yet know what to call these people. The word was coming. Airbenders. And while the world was still blinking at that miracle, the Avatar was losing. Far to the south, where the ice meets the open sea, a 17-year-old girl had been broken. Not defeated in the clean way stories describe, not knocked down so that she could rise again to music. Broken. Unalak and the darkness he had let in had taken her certainty apart piece by piece. And when it was over, she had been carried away from the wreckage with her bending intact and her faith in herself in ruins. The southern defeat was not supposed to happen this early in anyone's telling. It had happened anyway. And now the girl who was supposed to be the bridge between two worlds was on her way north to a city that did not know whether to worship her or blame her. Her name was Korra, and Republic City was waiting for her with its teeth bared. The city received her the way a courtroom receives a defendant. There was no parade, there was no confetti, no brass band, no old monk smiling from a podium. There was a police chief with metal cables at her hips and grief in her eyes who looked at the Avatar the way an assessor looks at a condemned building. There were white Lotus sentries who had been humiliated once already and had no intention of being humiliated again, and who guarded her less like an honor and like a liability. There was a council chamber full of men who saw a child and a problem in that order. And there was Tenzin, son of Aang, the last airbending master of the old generation, who received her with open arms and with a training schedule that had been designed for a different child entirely. That was the cruelty of it, and none of it was cruel on purpose. Tenzin loved the Avatar. He loved what the Avatar meant. He had built his whole life around being the teacher of the bridge between worlds, and when Korra came to him, he gave her everything he had, everything except the one thing she needed. He gave her his father's methods. The gates, the forms, the meditations, the philosophy, the patient architecture of airbending as Aang had lived it. He taught her the way you teach a student who arrives whole. Korra. She arrived carrying the South like a stone in her chest. She arrived flinching at her own failures before anyone could point them out. She arrived with the world's disappointment already loaded onto her shoulders, and every time Tenzin's methods failed her, and they did fail her, again and again in front of his children, in front of the sentries, in front of herself, the failure did not land as a lesson. It landed as confirmation. Of course she could not do it. Of course she was the worst Avatar who had ever lived. The South had told her so, and the training yard was only repeating it. Tenzin could not see it. That was the tragedy of him. He was a good man, a devoted man, a man drowning in the shadow of a father he could never stop measuring himself against, and he pushed her harder because pushing was the only language his legacy had taught him. He became a drill sergeant with a prayer book. And Korra, who could bend 3 elements and had never in her life been taught how to fail, began to bend under the weight in the only way she knew, which was to hide it. She smiled when she was not smiling inside. She trained until her body gave out so that her mind would not have the quiet time to speak. She was the Avatar. The world expected perfection. So she would perform perfection, or die performing the attempt. It is important to sit with that for a moment, because this girl, this cracked and guarded and ferociously loyal girl, is one half of the heart of this story. The other half was, at that very same hour, signing a check. Asami Sato did not arrive in the story the way villains arrive. She arrived the way angels arrive in advertisements for banks, poised, generous, impossibly competent. The heiress of future industries walked into the orbit of a broke pro-bending team with the unbothered grace of someone for whom money was not a resource but a weather condition, and she solved in one afternoon a problem that had been strangling 3 young athletes for a season. The team needed funding to compete. She provided it. Not the exact amount, more than the amount. The extra, she explained with a smile that could have been carved into the front of a bank, was for operating expenses or for celebrating. The fire ferrets looked at her the way sailors look at a harbor after a storm. Mako, the brooding firebender who had been holding his team and his brother together with stress and caffeine and sheer stubbornness, tried to thank her and discovered that his vocabulary had an upper limit. Bolin, the earthbender whose heart was approximately the size of a parade balloon, decided on the spot that he was in the presence of a saint. And Korra, watching from the edge of the room, felt something she did not have a name for yet. It was not gratitude exactly, it was recognition. Here was another girl carrying a performed self. Here was someone else who had learned to smile on the outside, while something else entirely happened on the inside. Korra could not have told you why she trusted Asami Sato almost immediately. She would later spend a long time wishing she had examined that instinct more carefully. Because Asami Sato was an equalist. She wore it the way she wore everything else, invisibly, under the silk. To the city, she was the grieving daughter of an industrialist, the patron of athletes, the poised young woman who donated to the right causes and laughed at the right moments. Underneath, she was a woman whose mother had been murdered by benders and who had looked at the world that had produced that murder and concluded that the world was rigged. Not accidentally rigged. Rigged. By design. The bender had the power, and the power had the law, and the law had the money, and the non-bender had the remainder, which was nothing. She had watched the spirit vines creep through the city like a beautiful cancer, and she had watched benders profit from the blight while ordinary families were priced out of their own neighborhoods. She had done the arithmetic, and when Ammon had stood up and said the quiet part aloud, she had not heard a monster. She had heard the first person in power to agree with her. That was the thing nobody in the coming war ever understood about Asami, and it is the thing that makes her half of the heart of this story. She was not a woman who had been tricked. She was not a woman who had been radicalized by a single lie. She was a woman who had looked at the world with clear eyes and chosen a side, and who carried her choice the way she carried everything, gracefully and at a cost she was still counting. She did not know in those early days that the convergence had marked her too. She did not know that somewhere under her grief and her politics and her perfect posture, the wind was waiting for her breath. That reveal was coming, and it would land on her life like a second convergence. But not yet. In the beginning, she was simply a double agent in her own skin, funding the Avatar's team with one hand and serving the revolution with the other, and telling herself that the two ledgers would never meet. They were going to meet. The city around them was a pressure cooker with the valve welded shut. In the council chamber, Tarlok, the ambitious waterbender with a reformer's smile and a knife's patience, was assembling his task force and his arguments, and both were aimed at the same target. He spoke of saving Republic City, and he meant conquering it. In the streets, Ammon's Equalists were multiplying faster than the police could count them, and their rhetoric was evolving from grievance into doctrine. And in the shadows of the shadows, something older was moving. A man with a philosophy and a crew of criminals who called themselves after a flower, the red lotus, had their own opinions about the Avatar and about the city, and their opinions did not involve anyone living happily. Two revolutions were coming to the same address. The city only knew about one of them, and above it all, quiet as snowfall, the spirit world was watching. Whispers crossed the veil. Fragments of visions touched sleepers who would wake with their hearts hammering, and the sense of having seen a life that was theirs and not theirs, a dark figure in the shape of the Avatar. A city in flames that might have been Republic City or might have been a warning. The spirits had their own ledger, and neither Korra nor Asami was on it in the way either of them believed. But that too was still to come. In the beginning there was only this, a broken avatar performing perfection for a teacher who could not see her, a double agent performing grace for a city that was about to catch fire. A pro-bending team that just wanted to win a championship, and a police chief, a council, a revolution, and a god's worth of old magic, all converging on the same small stage. The championship season opened. The masks were not yet in the streets, and Korra and Asami, the two halves of the heart of this story, began to orbit each other with the terrible inevitability of two tides that have not yet been told they are on opposite sides of a war.